Welcome to the Practicing Drummer podcast. My name is Craig, and in this episode, I have a conversation with Mark Ferber that was recorded in June of 2025. Mark has been on my radar for a while, but I got really obsessed with his playing a few years ago when I heard the Marc Copland album called Someday. I just love his sound and the creativity and clarity of his ideas. Plus, Marc Copland's music is just amazing. I also really like his playing with artists like Dave Scott, Ralph Alessi, Brad Shepik, Jonathan Kreisberg, and so many others. He's on over 200 recordings, so there's so much to check out. Oh, I should also mention that he works a lot with his twin brother, the trombonist Alan Ferber. In addition to playing and recording, he teaches at Cal State Fresno, which has an award-winning big band, and he also teaches in the master's program at Musicians Institute in Hollywood. Mark keeps a pretty low profile online, and I was only able to find a couple of interviews with him, so I was just thrilled when he agreed to do this. A week after we talked, he had a gig here in Minneapolis at a newer club called Berlin, and it was just awesome to see him play live. After the gig, we talked for a little while, and he showed me the cymbals I asked about later on in the interview. It was such a fun night, and I put up an Instagram reel of him trading on a blues if you want to go check that out. As always, I'll put links to some of the things we talk about in the show notes and on the blog at practicingdrummer.com. With that, let's get into it with Mark Ferber. Oh, hey, Mark, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You know, it's rare I get to do these kinds of things, so I appreciate you asking.
Oh, yeah. It's I'm really excited. I'm pretty obsessed with your playing. I was aware of you for a while, and I saw you, I think, in 2019 here in Minnesota when you came with Ralph Alessi to do a fundraiser for Jazz Central.
Oh, yeah, it was like a warehouse kind of, I'm trying to remember the venue, and I remember, I'm a big fan of that. It's Joe Lovano record from the 90s with Anthony Cox, Billy Hart, Tom Harrell, yes, et cetera, and the other disc as well. And that was the first time I actually saw Anthony Cox play because we were doing a double bill. I think he was playing after us. So that was a very kind of special night for me to get to see. I didn't even know he was in Minneapolis, and I was like, whoa, it's Anthony Cox. He lives here.
Yeah, he plays around here a lot. And like you, I'm a huge fan of that record. And then also the trio stuff he did with Blackwell and Lovano. And,
of course. That's incredible. Yeah.
Really great. But yeah, so that was the first time I saw you play. And then, of course, I've heard you on a lot of things. But then it wasn't until a few years ago when that Marc Copland album called Someday came out. And something about that album just grabbed me, and it's one of my all-time favorites. Your playing on it is so beautiful. Thank you. Sounds so good. The tunes are good.
Well, that was just to sort of talk about a little bit about Mark is, he's actually one of the reasons I moved to New York in the first place.
Interesting.
From Los Angeles. I graduated UCLA with a biogeography degree. I wasn't even planning on doing music to begin with. Me and my twin brother, Alan, I don't know, he's also a great musician still in New York. He lives in Nyack, upstate. And we just kind of, that's sort of a separate story into and of itself. But Mark was one of those guys. I remember seeing him at this old club in Culver City called the Jazz Bakery. And I saw him with John Abercrombie. It was John Abercrombie. I was a big fan of this record he did called Second Look with Billy Hart, Drew Gress, and John Abercrombie and Marc Copland. That was the quartet. Huge fan of Billy Hart, obviously. Mark came to the Jazz Bakery, and I saw him with a slight variation. Drew is playing bass, Abercrombie, and Peter Erskine.
Oh, wow.
Peter was playing a lot in L.A. at that time. So I'd make it a point to see Peter. I'd make it a point to see Billy Higgins, all these guys, Roy McCurdy, Joe LaBarbera, et cetera, all the cats, Dave Weckl, some of the fusion guys, Vinny Caliuta, those guys are living out here and playing a lot of the baked potato. But anyway, I saw that. I had been a fan of this record, and I saw him play at the Jazz Bakery, and from that moment, I was like, man, I got to play with this guy. I was obsessed with his harmony and his tunes, like you said, the way he writes, and just the sound that he can emanate from the piano, and also the sound that Mark and John, this sort of like this chordal soup, it's such a beautiful texture. It's fun to play drums under that, and I kind of like, he was kind of one of those reasons why I was like, I want to be in New York to be closer to guys like that, to play with musicians like that. So he was one of the a few musicians that kind of inspired me to make that move in the first place.
So when you would go see him play, did you talk to him and start forming a relationship, or was it mostly as a fan?
I didn't talk to him. I was too intimidated.
Okay.
I have a hard time if I'm really, sometimes, it's a little better now, but especially in those days, I was, music is, I don't know, it's all your heroes, it's kind of, they can be hard to approach. I mean, you're young, you're shy, you're intimidated, you're just getting into the music, you're questioning what you have to offer, yes. But, all these different things that play into your psychosis. And so I didn't talk to him until much years later. I remember, I think Bob Shepard, who's a very good friend of mine that I was playing with at that time in LA, invited me. I think it's the first time I went up to his house in Pelham. Bob was in New York. He had an apartment there for a while, going back and forth. And he was like, "Hey, you want to go up and play with Marc Copland?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." I mean, of course. And Mark, and I think John Abercrombie too. So we went up there, did a session. That's how I met Mark and John in the first place, was through Bob. And Bob's another huge inspiration. One of the guys that like kind of got my start in LA. He was calling me for a lot of gigs and like really supportive of younger musicians, always having sessions at his house, really giving a lot of opportunities for hungry younger musicians to sort of play, get out there and get their music out there. So yeah, he years later, he kind of invited me to go up there. And that's kind of how I started developing that musical relationship with Mark and John too. So that was great.
And that was quite a while. Well, what year are we talking about? I guess let's set up a timeline.
Yeah. I mean, I moved to New York in January of 2000, drove across the country.
Okay.
A long time ago. I was kind of going back and forth for a while, bi-coastal in a way, more in New York. But that's kind of when I initially moved there. And just to sort of wrap up the Mark thing, I met him years later, probably 2016 or something, like way, way later. So I'd already had this whole career in life in New York and played with all kinds of great people. Fortunate enough to play with so many different artists that, I live in LA now. I moved back, but during COVID, but it's one of those things. I was there so long, 21 years, that I got everything and more I wanted to get out of New York in that time period. So it's not, there's not like this magnetic pull to go back necessarily to live there, but I really enjoyed the opportunities, or appreciate the opportunities that it presented for me, opportunities that would not have presented themselves had I stayed here in LA. It's just a different environment, different scene.
Yeah, and now, you were there for so long that it seems like you have a pretty open door when you do go back. And it seems like you go back fairly regularly. I see you popping up on gigs quite often. Yeah,
I go back. During COVID, I would say that's kind of fresh. When I moved back, I was teaching. Joe LaBarbera was on sabbatical leave from Cal Arts. So I was covering his position for a semester, the COVID semester.
Oh, wow.
So literally so I was kind of living sort of in California at that time, doing that gig, which I'd done before in 2012. And I always loved sort of spending a few months, especially during the winter in California. Yeah. And my parents live out here. It's nice to be closer to them, be able to visit them, and a lot of old friends out here. So, I was kind of already living out here and made the decision to sort of I'd been thinking about it, to sort of just make the move while absolutely nothing was happening in music. So everything was remote at that point. So I was like, this is the perfect time to do this. I've been thinking about it, so I'm going to do it now, which I'm not the only one. I mean, that's obviously, that was a huge wave of people that were displaced for this reason or that.
Yeah, and it seems like the scene in LA is pretty active right now. You do a lot of playing at clubs out there, and do you do a lot of your recordings out there, or are you going to New York, East Coast, or Europe to do recordings?
That's a good question. I mean, I do some stuff out here. When I was in New York, I was involved in so many bands that were simultaneously touring and recording, trying to stay on top of their their output, their recording output in order to get gigs, because that's part of the process of just continuing to work. So I was involved in a lot of different bands that were sort of in that zone. And so therefore there's just a lot of gigging and a lot of recording going on because I was in a lot of different projects. I mean, really ran the gamut, big bands, small groups, whatever, avant-garde, straight ahead. I kind of like to delve into all that stuff. And so out here, not so much, not as many bands per se. So, but I still do recordings for different projects. I still go to New York for different projects to record. It's pretty loose. It's like whatever happens. Sometimes I'll do a few little commercial things out here. I've done like jingles. I've done, but very little. But mostly for me, it's mostly at this point, gigging, touring, and teaching. I teach at 2 different schools. So
okay, awesome. And that's something I want to get to as well. And you touched on it a little bit just now, talking about the wide variety of projects that you've played on and your wide range of interests. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I like most about following you is, you have such versatility, but you always end up sounding like you. And
oh, thanks.
There are pieces of your development that I'm really curious about because I hear you play straight ahead stuff. It's not only convincing, but it sounds amazing. And
oh, thank you.
You have your own thing, and but then I can hear you support a singer and just kind of play it straight down the middle and be very, for lack of a better word, doing your job as a drummer. But then you've got the avant-garde thing. And anyway, I'm kind of rambling. But what I'm curious about, I guess, is going back to learn about your development and your influences and how we got to where you are now. And then I have many, many questions about your career now.
I hope I can answer all these. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so I guess the first thing I want to know is what drew you to the drums and how you got started playing and what that looked like for you.
I think it was just, I grew up, again, it's a luxury, but it's just to grow up with another musician, like-minded, identical twin.
Yeah, right.
First of all, right. But simultaneously, side by side, in this together, being able to have someone in the house. I mean, I grew up in suburban Northern California with not a whole lot going on. I mean, within striking distance of urban areas, Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, but not living in that immediate area. So there's not a whole, it's a pretty quiet town. So first of all, to have Alan there and to be able to sort of grow up making music together, checking out records, doing stuff, just even playing duos all the time was huge. We didn't, and we also had our school, and this is like the importance of music in schools, I think, all the way from junior high. Junior high, high school, obviously college, but especially those sort of younger grades. We had a very strong music program in all those great, inspiring directors, music directors, and in junior high and high school that really, and actually my high school band director, first one, we had four directors in 4 years, but my freshman year in high school, I went to Camp Lindo High School in Moraga, California, and my high school band director, Ken Bergman, was and still is a great drummer, and he was probably arguably my biggest, he got me started, a huge influence on my early development, playing technique, all that stuff. Super inspiring teacher too, like very animated, and he knew how to count off a tune. He knew how to get the students going. And so I think a huge part of how I started was this sort of like positive infrastructure in schools, like this importance of music and like playing every morning, 7 a.m. in the morning, jazz band, different charts every day. That's how I got my reading together too. Yeah. It's just to be just chart after chart, different. Here's a Latin one, swing, bossa, whatever, and you're just, just the process of playing music at that age, just by ear, nothing else, and listening to music. I mean, I wasn't really studying it per se, but just like having that music in school all the time to play was hugely important for for my development. And in terms of just how I chose, me and my brother both wanted to play the trombone, actually.
Oh, okay.
Probably because we're twins, we wanted to do everything the same, but they're like, yeah, we can't have two identical twins play the exact same instrument. That's just a disaster waiting to happen down the road. So, and I think they needed a drummer in the section. So I was like, yeah, I'll play drums. Why not? So we never changed instruments the entire time. I mean, once we were assigned those instruments in junior high school, we stuck with those for the rest of our life.
And were there private lessons at that time too, or
not? No, it's mostly just. I mean, the only private lessons we had up to that point was piano. But like I'm talking Suzuki method, like all kids or a lot of kids go through. It's just to kind of like have music in their lives and have it in their ear. It's really important. So we had a great piano instructor named Sandy Bowen, and she gave us weekly lessons just on piano, and those were great. I didn't really continue piano once I discovered the drums, because I became so obsessed with playing the drums that I just stopped that. But and I resonated more with the sound of the drums and the physicality and the playing of the drum set anyway, and classical percussion too, that I just sort of stuck with that. But it was Ken, my band director, would give me some lessons after school, he just, which were great. And then he recommended me for another guy. Once he was like, okay, I want you to have more experience and different input. So there's a guy in Redwood City, California, named Scott Morris, who was a great drummer. He played with all kinds of people. He played with but most notably Richie Cole. He played with Richie Cole a lot.
Oh, wow.
And another guy, I don't know if you know Steve Turre, the trombonist, but I studied with his brother Peter Turre for a minute, and he also was great teacher who played with Ray Charles back in the day. And they all kind of, you know how it is. They all kind of give you little different inputs and like give you different points of inspiration, different grooves and different things to check out, exercises, whatever it is. And it was kind of like cobbling all that stuff together. But I would say mostly I learned from them for the technique, but stylistically, just from me and my brother going to check out a ton of music and listening and buying a ton of albums and just kind of listening and playing, trying to copy it.
Yeah. And who were your favorite musicians and drummers during that era that you were obsessed with? And were your brother and you aligned on that, or?
Oh, completely.
Okay.
Yeah. I know I know way more about the trombone than I should. About trombone players than is like normal for a human to know about the trombone. But we started off because we were playing a lot of big bands in high school. We were both checking out. I was obsessed with all the, Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, all the Mel Lewis, Thad Jones, all those bands that you were playing in school. Like it was like, oh, what's this Big Swing Face, or I'm going to check that. Yeah, I'm going to go buy that album. This is great. And then you hear Buddy Rich play it, and you're like, it changes your life in a way.
Right.
Or we're going to play Little Darlin', or we're going to play something by whatever. Whatever tune it was, I would just I'd want to find the recording of it, and just a lot of how I learned how to play those tunes was through just getting those albums and playing along with them. But yeah, my earliest influences were first the big band drummers. Like I said, all the drummers, Sam Woodyard, all the drummers basically with Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Buddy Rich, Krupa. My grandmother actually sang with Gene Krupa, weirdly.
Oh, wow.
She was an actress. She worked for MGM, and she was also on Broadway, and she sang. No kidding. I have a great picture of her sing on stage with Gene Krupa. It's an incredible document that my mom gave me. And Marquis with her name, Pamela Britton with Gene Krupa Orchestra. Amazing.
Wow.
That was cool. I mean, I was like, wow. I didn't get to know her because she unfortunately died pretty young, but that had to play into our music somehow.
Oh, sure. And were you and your brother playing together a lot as you were discovering this music and going off and playing with records? Would you come together and play?
All the time. All the time, yeah. I mean, first of all, every morning with the big band at school, but also we were forming our own bands and like trying to get gigs around town. Whatever we could do, we were playing all the time duo. Even if he was practicing, I would like barge into his room with a snare drum and just start playing along with him and just, annoy the hell out of him. Get out of my room.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were playing all the time together. Yeah.
Okay. And you were, of course, practicing on your own too. Do you remember, were you a lot of technical practice or was it mostly playing with records? What was that like for you?
I think it was Peter that kept a notebook for me, in our lessons. And this is really important for me to discipline my practice. So it wasn't like, totally unorganized and scattered and you're not accomplishing anything. But I remember he would just have like the first thing was just on hands, and he would give me some, what did we work on? I mean, some of those books, like the Haskell W. Haar book early on, some of those little classical excerpts, or I also studied a little classical percussion as well at UCLA with Mitchell Peters, who wrote a ton of great books.
Yeah.
So but he would organize it in a way that I kind of still use today. It's like hands, start with hands, like good. That's pretty young. The attention span is shorter, but at that time, it's like 10 to 15 minutes of just this exercise or this etude. Now let's go to feet. Give me some bass drum exercises or bass drum hi-hat coordinated exercises, maybe out of, I can't remember. I mean, stick control, all the syncopation. You can devise all those exercises and you can use that book in so many different ways. So then he'd have that. And then he'd kind of do like 4-way coordination and sort of put it all together, hands, feet, everything happening together. And you run through, all the exercises that you work on for four-limb coordination, right cymbal on the right, hi-hat 2 and 4, feather the bass drum, comping on the left hand. And those, go through all of that stuff and then Latin things and then sort of do that. And then after that, you'd always have a groove of the day. So he'd write out like a different funk or rock groove or bossa or samba or whatever it was. So that was kind of the fun part of the lesson because, you just basically at that age, you just want to kind of play beats and you want to bypass all the laborious stuff and just go straight for the funky beats,
You have to have fun too.
But he was good. He was good at sort of disciplining my practice in a way where I kind of got everything done technically. And then the end was always like that groove and then also an album. And eventually I was like, I need to start, because I don't have many people to play with in this town I'm growing up in. I need to find some. So I remember The Big Beat, Art Blakey was my very first album. And played along with that countless times and tried to figure out what he was doing in terms of his ride cymbal playing and his comping and like how he played behind different soloists. And then Alan got John Coltrane, Blue Train, and then we got into that one. And then we just kind of kept going on and on from there. But that's kind of how I organized my practicing at that time.
Do you remember an album that you maybe got told to check out or found on your own somehow that just kind of blew your mind and you didn't even know how to get into?
Oh man, it's hard to point to one. Because let's see. Well, I mean, again, like The Big Beat. Whenever I hear that album, it brings back so much nostalgia. It's like, to me, maybe it's because of the very first jazz album that I heard. That to me is basically what jazz is. I mean, that's the sound that to me represents kind of that and Blue Train are like, when I hear those, it still brings me back to almost that first. I was like, oh my God, it's like this mystical, magical quality to those, the way they're recorded and just everything about them that really made a huge impression on me initially. As you go through, obviously, then you're enticed by, and I got into some of the fusion stuff, and then you go down that rabbit hole. Yeah, forget it. I got fully into Dave Weckl in high school. I totally obsessed. I wanted to grow a mullet, and I wish I could have, but I couldn't. And to dress, the whole thing. Went to a lot of his clinics. I have 2 signed posters of his.
Nice.
And I got really into the electric band. I saw the electric band a lot at that time, and whatever albums I could buy. He was huge in the late 80s.
Oh, absolutely. I did the same exact thing, wanting to dress like him. Yeah. The posters on the wall. He even signed a poster for my mom, she used to take me to his drum clinics when he'd come through Minneapolis. So yeah, it was, he was like Michael Jordan to all of us back then.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, he was totally the Michael Jordan of drumming, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up, because one of the questions I have on my list was to ask you if you ever went through a fusion phase, because I was listening to, I think it's your brother's most recent nonet record. There's a tune called Icefall, and your solo on that reminded me, not totally of, but it reminded me of Chad Wackerman in a way.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Some of the movement around the toms and
the artist that I play with most that resembles sort of that aesthetic that sort of brought that out a lot in my playing. I mean, it wasn't a fusion gig at all, but it's sort of some of the things he wrote were sort of fusion. It was Jonathan Kreisberg, the guitar player.
Oh yeah,
and he would sort of write in sort of a way that sort of could bring some of that stuff out, which is kind of fun, like to bring some of that aesthetic out. And I think that's why actually we got along, me and Jonathan, musically, because he's hugely influenced by Holdsworth and a lot of the same people that I was influenced by in high school. And we had that common language, and and also experimenting on odd meters and fusing out on some things. And Chad Wackerman, I remember seeing him with Holdsworth a bunch at different places. And
oh wow.
And also Gary Husband and Vinny, and that sound for sure for a particular point in my development was pretty pervasive and influenced how I play. I kind of got out of that at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, to get out of it, but I kind of just transitioned into something else as one does. But that was a huge, I mean, like you said, generationally, those drummers really inspired a lot of us, in a great way. So I'm glad to have that sort of component in my playing, because it's cool.
Yeah, it was a fun era to grow up in too. It was kind of like having our own Buddy Rich, alive and in front of us,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whether it was Weckel or Vinny or Chad or whoever, it was amazing.
And you remember I'm sure you had this, but Contemporary Drummer Plus One.
Absolutely.
That was, what a great teaching thing. I mean, that was incredible. Charts and reading styles, all kinds of styles. Jingle day, he had a jingle thing, like a sports car jingle. And then he had the odd meter thing, and I was like, and spur of the moment, all these syncopated 16th note things, and I was like, wow, that was great. I mean, that was, talk about limited resources during that time, unlike now, but he's kind of ahead of his time in terms of the teaching thing. He's always been a great teacher, but with his videos and all that stuff. But that to me was like a game changer. I still wow, more people need to do that, because
it was amazing. I even used some of that for my Berkeley audition.
Cool.
I actually took the cassette into a recording studio and recorded myself playing with Garden Wall was one of the tunes, and I can't remember the others, but it was a lot of fun,
The cassette, I love the cassette.
Yeah, exactly. Since we're still on the topic of practicing, I think I heard you talk in another interview, and you haven't done too many that I could find, so I was psyched to find a little bit about you. You talked about using the Omnibook, the Charlie Parker Omnibook.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how you use that. Were you reading it? Was it learning the tunes by ear and then referencing the Omnibook? And kind of how did you work in your sticking stuff and all that?
Yeah, it's nothing too scientific. I mean, so there's this little clip You remember that clip, Elvin Jones video? Tony Marino actually is interviewing him, good friend, who teaches at NYU. Who he'd be great to have on if you haven't had him. He's been around, and he was basically Elvin raised him.
Oh wow, okay,
yeah, and he's the kid interviewing Elvin Jones in a different drummer. That video,
okay.
Great drummer. Still, he lives in New York. But I remember that clip in that where he discusses 3-card Molly, where he kind of plays the melody just on the snare drum at first, and then he adds the feet, and then for the second round, and then the third round, he basically improvises around that melody around the drums. So in a sense, I use that as sort of inspiration to, for the Omni book. It's like all these great melodies, that Bird wrote, and also solos, and concise too, so that you could fit them in a book. And so I was like, oh, what it would sound like if you just kind of worked on, they're so rhythmic and active, and there's a lot of cool little twists and turns. Use it as like little snare drum etudes. So I started bringing that in, started checking them out, and also using them for my students, because a lot of students don't know a whole lot of tunes these days for whatever reason, because maybe whatever, but I'm not going to get into that, but I've noticed that that's not a priority. So what better way to learn at least some Bird tunes than go through the Omni book, check out these things, treat them as snare drum etudes, and then work them around the drum set. See if you can keep those heads, and especially the heads, orchestrate them around the drum set, whether you write it out or improvise it, and then put on the record and play along with it. See if you could do the same thing. And because they're coincide exactly with the recording that it's coinciding to in the book. So it's a great way to sort of like learn those tunes. And at least in my experience, when I was sessioning a lot in New York, Bird tunes, you probably play 1 or 2 Bird tunes every time. So it's good to know those tunes just for learning jazz. Like, you wrote great tunes. So that's kind of how loosely how I would practice them.
And you mentioned writing out orchestrations, or having the students write out orchestrations. Did you ever do that?
I didn't do that, because I would sort of just kind of mess around, because I in a way have already gone through that process of kind of knowing how to read ahead a little bit and orchestrate things that way. But students don't necessarily have that ability. So you've got this line basically that Bird is playing, right? Let's just say the melody that has that ebbs and flows in the rhythm, and that also has peaks and valleys dynamically. As it goes up, it goes down. And so sometimes if they're at a total loss on how to orchestrate it, or the choreography around the drums, I encourage them to maybe, if he's playing a line that maybe descends, then maybe orchestrate something on the drum set that replicates that sound. And again, so you can kind of you're working on melodicism too, and shaping. It's a good thing to work on, I think, for drummers for soloing. So I would kind of encourage them to sort of, you can write it out like this, snare, rack, floor, bass drum. There's a triplet idea that descends, or do it the other way. And so it gives them like little things to work on, to write out, and then to practice. So they're kind of thinking creatively. It's like, how do I write this? Thinking compositionally. You're thinking musically, because you're trying to replicate what Bird is playing, the shapes, the actual melody that you're playing. You're working on comping, because again, I work on with those things, like how the melodies kind of, the strong points of the rhythm, where they resolve, and how to comp through it. Like maybe if you're just playing time and use comping. So anyway, there's all kinds of different things I like to sort of do with it.
In practicing that way, is that primarily how you worked on your melodic approach to playing? Because one of the things that I do like the most about your playing is the sense of melody that I hear. And I don't just mean that you can hear the tune as you're playing, but I just mean on the drums and using the different tones and colors. And, I think of it as a signature thing that you do. Of course, you're not the only one, but a lot of your fills go from low to high, floor tom to high tom. And it's one of my favorite things that kind of stands out to me as like a fingerprint, like, oh yeah, that's got to be Mark,
Oh, nice. Oh, cool.
And I'm curious if you consciously worked on any of that kind of thing, or if it just came organically through, learning all the heads and stuff.
That's a tricky one to answer. I would say that I do work on like shapes on the drums, like different melodic shapes. So I like to work on them in different groupings. So not necessarily as like drawn out melodies. I don't think in terms of creating a whole melody, but in terms of how does one shape lead to the next? And then I also like to have fun with, that sort of idea of, well, when you just kind of like, connecting the shapes in a way that makes sense musically on the drums, but also like going in and out of different note pulses, whether it's eighth notes, triplets, 16th notes, and kind of like work on. I feel like those things kind of you need to work on. I mean, we talk about improvisation in jazz, and it's like, I feel like what that means is stringing together ideas that you've already, it's an impossibility to sort of come up with something new every single time, like some new vocabulary. Right. That's not how it works.
Right.
It's like who can sort of like organize this stuff in a way that is musical and like, but you take any great jazz drummer and they do that. Elvin Jones, Max Roach is probably the best example. He's got recurring vocabulary that he organizes in different ways every time. And it's just like, I think anyone who's going to develop their own sound needs to find out what their vocabulary is for, what it is that resonates with them in the way they play, and organize and find that stuff. You know how it is. It's like I've gone through so much vocabulary, played along with so many albums, played with so many people, worked on a lot of transcriptions, played along, and you kind of whittle it down to maybe about 4% of that. And then the rest, is like stuff that's inspired by those ideas, maybe.
Right.
It's hard to, like I said, it's hard to put it into words because music is so mysterious in a lot of ways. But like, it's, for me, it was like just kind of working on something every day and just all that stuff kind of accumulating over time, and then try to figure out how that stuff that you're working on translates, and then playing a lot so you can trial and error all this stuff and see what works and see how to connect those ideas. That to me came with time, with like actual time. It's like, that's why it's cool to hear a drummer over a long period of time. It's just to hear how things change and
how they stay the same.
And also, it's almost like, I mean, you once you start recording, you have a sound already, and then over time, I mean, that sound doesn't necessarily change dramatically, but it does morph.
Yes.
A little bit. And but if you've got a sound, you got a sound, you kind of play it, you kind of think about the architecture. That doesn't really change much, but like different input and different inspirations and ideas you're working on over time can sort of, I like hearing those small little adjustments over time. It's kind of fun it's like Roy Haynes is a good example. It's like you hear that early Roy Haynes and it's like almost doesn't sound, it sounds like Roy Haynes, but then like as he develops, his sound changes, his vocabulary changes a bit. It becomes more refined. It becomes more Roy. It becomes like until it solidifies into this thing that's like distinctly him. That's why I love listening to music still. I mean, there's so much you can garner from these albums over time. And
do you listen to your own records or records that you have played on?
I used to a lot more to learn. I would say to really dissect them. I think that's changed over time. But I would really get inside of them and try to figure out everything that it did wrong.
Did you ever have any major moments of feeling discouraged? Or, I mean, because you're on well over 200 albums at this point.
Quite a few, yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't heard one that's, I would say, is anything less than great, and most of them are really great.
Well, much like like you said with this podcast, it's like you can edit.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But no, I mean, I feel like I'm in the studio, I'm fairly consistent in a way where I can get what I play is not, I mean, it's, no, I'm pretty proud of the output that recorded output that I've put out, that I've been involved with.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing I'd be like, do not check this out. I mean, I think, well, maybe there is, but if there is, I won't tell you.
Sure. Do you have favorites? Do you have a favorite or two that you tend to steer people towards?
Oh, geez, the favorite thing, it changes so much over time that I don't really, I don't even like to go there, but
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I just, everything is such let's just put it this way. I do put 110% into every situation that I go into. Like if I'm going to take a gig or take a recording, I'm going to go in. I'm not going to go in with the attitude of, this is a drag. Why did I do this? This music sucks. Like, no, if I say yes to something, I'm going to go in and do it to the best of my ability and that. So I think for that reason, I haven't like dive bombed a recording. I haven't like sabotaged a session where it's like, that's not me. I try to be professional and give everything that I can. If I say yes to something, I think everyone should have that mentality because unfortunately in my experience, sometimes it's a drag, when you get in a gig situation or a recording or whatever it is, or a tour, worst of all, and someone's not into it for whatever reason. And it just taints everything. It taints the morale. It taints the music itself. It's just nobody likes it.
Yeah.
So
how do you prepare for? Well, first, let me ask, do you have a different approach to the live gigs you do, to the recordings? And is there any different type of preparation that you do for recording days in terms of even like personal stuff, like rest or diet, or do you have any rituals you do before recording sessions?
I don't. No, not really. No, I just kind of go about my day in a normal fashion. Yeah, I'm not like, I was watching a Dodger game yesterday. A part of it, and they were talking about, I think it was Freddie Freeman. A lot of athletes have this. Kobe, I think, had it, where they had their routine does not change. Like they do everything they eat the same bowl of cereal every morning, at the same time. And they do. And I think that if that works for you, I think some people need that. That's great. But I've never been like that. I just kind of prepare. I just kind of keep the preparation ongoing in terms of just trying to stay consistent with my own practicing and try to keep my chops up. And like when I get to the session, I just treat it like, because I don't like to put a lot of pressure on myself for anything. I like to sort of, it's because it's not, I mean, it's just like you're making music and it's not, you're not changing, the world per se. You're just trying to have a good time, make some good music. And like, that's it. I mean, and at least for me, if I put myself in this preparation mode, that maybe I can, for me personally, you can psych myself out a little bit or like put too much pressure on myself. So I just kind of go into it. Okay, we're here, and whatever it was, concert hall or a recording studio or just a normal restaurant gig. It's just all this. It should all more or less be a similar mentality.
That's really interesting. And just, we talked a little bit before we started recording about how I get anxious for these recordings and stuff. And and just hearing you talk about this, it almost makes me think maybe I'm putting too much pressure on myself and, cramming to do a lot of preparation and a few days or weeks, and then it's maybe building it up into something bigger. But then by the time we come online, it's, oh, hey, Mark, how's it going? This is just going to be a regular conversation. Yeah. It sounds like you have that approach for all your gigs and records too, though I know you prepare.
Like I said, the preparation is just ongoing. It's like I'm almost preparing when I'm not even preparing something for something in particular and specific. So, but if there's a set of music that I'm going to be have to play and learn that I've never seen before, I'll ask for the charts and I'll play along with whatever they send me, and I'll try to get a vibe, because I like to go into something not cold. I'd like to kind of know what I'm getting myself into and be prepared for the music, so time is used efficiently and we can sort of especially in a recording situation, so we can sort of get through. If you have the luxury of getting the charts in advance, then that I think it makes the recording process, just everyone's day, a lot easier.
Sure.
As opposed to doing several takes, you're exhausting everyone because somebody hasn't done their homework and it's a drag. And but even on gigs too, it's like takes someone 3 to 4 gigs to learn the book. And it's like, man, you had this sent to you like a month ago. Like you could have just look at it, open it. And that stuff kind of drives me a little, not crazy, but I'm just like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy that is the liability.
Yeah.
Or is learning on the gig.
So you've talked about ongoing practice and keeping your chops up. What does that look like for you these days? Are you practicing every day or?
Yeah. I mean, when, I was talking earlier about, when I was younger and just your day is predictable and you have the same hours and you can sort of maintain a daily routine, but it's not like that anymore. Unfortunately, it's like I'm moving around a lot. And so I love it when I'm home. Yes, absolutely. I hit the drums every day. I've been trying to get into different kinds of things. Like, I just bought a bunch of mics and like I have this booth in my place, that I actually moved out from New York. It's a recording. It's like a whisper room. It's a booth. Yeah. And so that's been great. First of all, not to annoy the hell out of the neighbors. Right. But also for my own, I could practice 24/7. Not that I do, but I have the luxury of being able to practice late at night without bothering anyone around me. Yeah. And I bought some mics so I can do some recording stuff for different people if that comes up. Yeah, and I could just sort of that was a big thing for me in New York, was like to practice in a way that's not psychological. If I got people around me that I'm potentially annoying, that was a huge block. That actually prevented me from practicing for a while.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from drummers in apartments in New York.
Yeah, it sucked. And so I ended up getting a studio in the Gowanus for a long time. Oh, okay. That was like over an automotive, like it's a transmission shop. Of course, that you're breathing in these like noxious fumes all day. So that was a whole other scene. But that, at least that allowed me to practice in a way where I could just play full volume, and do like those repetitive things that I feel like I like to do to keep chops up. But yeah, I keep a routine. Not necessarily, I couldn't tell you exactly what it is because it changes a lot, and it changes depending on what music I'm learning. So a lot of it is just kind of going through new charts and preparing for the next series of gigs that are coming up. Yeah. Or also sometimes I even practice to prepare for my teaching. I want to run through stuff that maybe would be effective for teaching. So I kind of work on ideas for that. So, but yeah, it's not like a set in stone kind of thing at the moment.
One question I have, while we're still on the topic of practicing, what has your relationship been with practicing with a metronome? Because your time is so strong. You must know that, but it's one of the things that has stood out to me so much as I've been doing a lot of research over the last month. There's a couple. I'm just looking at my notes here. There's that tune on the Nonet record, In Hindsight. That's the slower song with the straight groove.
Nice
and
tune.
Your time is just rock solid on that, even while you're building up so much energy to and through the guitar solo. And then, on fast tunes too, there's the More I See You, I think is the up-tempo tune. And your time is rock solid, even through the drum solo when it, it could speed up or come down to be more comfortable.
Again, like back when I was like listening to my records a lot more, that's one of the things I would check consistently is like, is everything in check? Is everything holding? And not always, but like, that was something that I was always trying to work on to try to keep the tempo more or less the same from start to finish.
And how did you work on that?
With a combination of a metronome, working on exercises. If I'm working on exercises, I generally work on them with a metronome. Okay. So I can just kind of, but not everything, because I felt like if I just exclusively worked on things with a metronome, then I didn't really know how to hold the time on my own, take the training wheels off, so to speak. So I'd record myself on gigs basically, and that was the best way to check your your time, your sort of like playing time is like, okay, what's influencing me to speed up? What's influencing me to drag? And sometimes it could have been any number. It could have been on me. It could have been the bass player. It could have been the soloist. Could have been any number of things. And I'm always like, how do I make my time stronger so that doesn't happen? And so I tried to pinpoint those moments where I would like maybe be influenced by someone else's time and try to get better at that. No one's a machine.
Right.
I tell my students this too. Like, be careful what you play along with, because there's a lot of because it's one of those things. It's like we talk about the great albums all the time, but most of them move. It's like, most of them are like, just yesterday, I was just put on, just to kind of get things moving. I would put on the John Coltrane record with like, I think it's just called Coltrane, Chim Chim Cheree and Inchworm and Miles
Great.
Mode. And, Elvin, that first tune right off the bat, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And it really picks up. I mean, and that's a great, it's one of the great rhythm sections of all time. And so, I just try to be aware. At least I think back when I was younger, I didn't know it was happening.
Right.
And I think it's one of those things you have to develop is like, okay, know when it's happening, like be able to hear when it's happening and either go make that decision of strong arming it to keep it. Or if you can't, then just make it go with it, but at least at least recognize when things are moving. That's the goal.
Did you work with the metronome in any kind of creative ways? I know there's a lot of apps now that'll kind of drop the metronome randomly for you, so you have to work on your own sense of time. Did you do any of that for yourself?
The closest I got to that, I had this, again, a cassette in the 80s that I think one of my teachers gave me. It was basically of standards. It was a terrible sounding. It was like a MIDI, but 80s MIDI. It was like a DX7 or something. And but it was like Cherokee, and it was like Soul Eyes, and it was like a few Autumn Leaves, maybe different kinds of tunes, different kind of feels. And it was all metronomic. And every track had trades, but there was absolutely no click track whatsoever. And it was like, there's no lifeline.
Right.
And that to me was the hardest, especially on the super slow tunes. I was like, I swear to God, the amount of times I rewound that tape to try to get it right, it's like a lot. And I was like, oh, I'm going to record myself playing along with this. And then when you listen back to it from an audience perspective, you're just like, oh, that's right there. That's where that idea right there is a problem. Like that's what's kind of causing me to push forward. And that was a huge one for me. Like whoever made that thing was a genius. But with metronomes, I generally would just put it on the downbeats, or sometimes I experiment when I practice up tempos, I'll sometimes put it on every 4 measures.
Oh, sure.
You know?
Yep.
Or like even slower tempos just to really challenge, so it's really, you got a lot of time before the next click. And that sort of like replicates what I was talking about before. But also I'll just put the metronome on 2 and 4 and I won't worry about it. But in terms of like, it's funny you mentioned that tune of Alan's because, those tunes were initially recorded during the pandemic remotely with a click. And so I ran through that tune so many times with to a click.
Oh, okay.
And I just got to know that tempo so well.
Yeah, I bet.
And so we actually recorded it remotely, and then we recorded it live, and that for sure probably helped.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so to jump topics here, one thing I wanted to ask you about, I noticed on the Mesro show that you did with Alex Goodman, you did a lot of hand drumming, like literally playing the drum set with your hands, and it was really amazing. And it made me wonder if you studied hand percussion at all.
No, not really. I remember seeing like Jorge Rossi do it like a few times. Sure. You get this nice, softer texture. Mesro is also a kind of it's a lot of glass around. It's a pretty reflective room. But so a little goes a long way in a room like that.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know. It's no, I've never studied like congas or anything like that. I just kind of like use it as an alternate texture sometimes here and there.
Is it something you've practiced, or you just start doing it on gigs and working it out that way?
Did it, and that was pretty much it. Yeah, it wasn't nothing calculated.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. Another thing I noticed is that you were making some pretty big, exaggerated, but graceful arm movements that reminded me of classical players, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, and I'm wondering if that's maybe something that came from that time of your life, and if you can talk a bit about your classical study.
Yeah, I mean, that was mostly in high school and beginning of college. I studied with Jack Van Geem, who was he was in the San Francisco Symphony for forever, for a long time. And then I went to UCLA my first year on a scholarship for music, and I studied with Mitchell Peters, who we all know through his books. But he was the timpanist with the LA Phil at that time. So, I believe he was a timpanist for the LA Phil. But we actually didn't study much timpani. I studied mostly snare drum stuff with him, and mallets, like marimba.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he was a stickler on like execution. I'm trying to remember. Geez, I was playing mostly match grip then. I can't remember if he was a stickler on a particular grip, but mostly on like interpretation. And that year was the year it was like, this is not for me, this way of playing, because it was too much about a very particular kind of interpretation of the material that I was more in the school, of personal expression and like kind of interpreting the material and the way you're hearing it. And I don't think I was ever cut out to be in that world. But I certainly did, not necessarily from my classical studies, but this whole idea of using your arms, like that maybe came from someone else, where he was talking about like different breaking points, like your wrist and then your elbow, like using that motion, and then your shoulder, like using your whole arm. And I remember I think it was Peter, they had this whole thing with just your wrist first, and then the same upstrokes, downstrokes with those three different breaking points. And I think that really stuck, in terms of like how you play the cymbal, go around and prepare your strokes, upstroke into the resolution. And that, I think that really played into it, how I sort of like try to use my arms in sort of a flowing motion. Also, it's a different attack, I think, on the instrument. It's a different sort of like flow that you can get on the ride cymbal and different ways of moving around. And that's certainly things, especially as you get older, it's good to work on it, because everything kind of gets a little trickier.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just a lot of practicing is calisthenics, is like motion and like just keeping everything loose. It's a little harder to warm up like at first, but yeah, it's like, I think that was a big thing for me. And also there's Gary Chafee, like sticking patterns book. So he talks a lot about like those upstrokes, up, tap, down, and upstroke, downstroke, tap stroke, full stroke, those four things, and countless exercises, and some that I would write out myself, working on those different ways of preparing the stroke. So I think that also played into it, where it's just like, and then it's like kind of resolves over here. It helps you read ahead a little bit of the material, which is good for sight reading, and also helps you prepare your body for where you're headed on the drum set.
Oh, interesting. That makes me want to check out those books again.
Yeah.
And since you just mentioned a couple teachers, there is something I don't want to forget to ask, so I'll just go for it now. Did I read somewhere that you studied with Billy Higgins?
In a way, yeah, I did. He was, in college, I didn't really, the only teacher I had was Mitch, my first year. And then I abandoned the major and got into a different degree altogether. But Billy Higgins, the last year, just when we were leaving, they were starting a jazz program my senior year. And Kenny Burrell came in and brought all his, people in, which were like a who's who. It was Harold Land and Billy Higgins, and I think Billy Childs came in, and Oscar Bashir and Gerald Wilson. A pretty impressive list of jazz luminaries, like legacy musicians. And Billy was someone I'd already kind of following around. But he taught a class. He taught a drum class, and so that is in that capacity. I studied with him because it was basically, from what I remember, it was basically a bunch of frat boys that were kind of like halfway into it and that didn't even know who he was, and me, who was just like, wow, this is incredible. Like this is amazing. I get to ask him about all this stuff. Ornette, and I get Lee Morgan, all this stuff I'm obsessing over, Charles Lloyd. And so in that sense, I studied with him because I would play and then he would say, oh yeah, try it this way. Or,
do you remember anything specific that you got from him?
He wasn't like a John Riley type of teacher where you'd cut and dry, here's an exercise you could do to help resolve this problem. Here's a transcription you can analyze, which is a great way to teach. But he didn't teach like that. It was more like, here's how I do it. Here's how you did. I would play, and then here's how I do it. And then you just kind of like watch and just kind of take it in that way. And that's a great form of teaching if you have that kind of vibe and energy on the drum set, like which he did. It was just like, oh, okay, so he's kind of doing it. It wasn't like do specifically this. It was like, here's how I play on this tune. Check it out. Yeah. Without really. And it was like, oh, okay. And then you watch him and then you're totally inspired.
Oh yeah.
And you I learned things like how to play dynamically, like how to play under a piano solo, how to create a broad beat. And he would just demonstrate things. I remember like brushes on the music stand. He would just kind of show me different patterns and stuff. I don't even remember specifically what they were because I was just freaked out, but he would just do it in a way where it just kind of made sense, but nothing you could take home on paper and work on. It was just in the moment. Here's, and it was more of an energy than a exercise, I would say.
Yeah. What an awesome experience you had. And then I also remember you speaking about getting to play with Herbie Hancock.
Yeah. Well, just once. That was an amazing moment because he played with Billy Higgins, a trio. I was like, wow, this doesn't happen ever.
Was that during the same period at college?
Yeah. We played, towards my last year of studying at UCLA, and there's a concert at the Wadsworth Theater, just a big band concert, but the guest artist happened to be Herbie Hancock that semester.
Amazing.
So and we'd had good, we had Bob Mitzer and we had all these different, Steve Houghton, different artists, great. But, it's Herbie Hancock. And I got to play a tune with him in the big band. And that changed my life. It's just the way he played. I'd never experienced that kind of energy before. I'd never experienced that sound that he can get out of the piano. And this is like late 90s Herbie. He was listening to those albums at that time. He was dealing. He was he still is. But he was extremely active, playing a ton with all kinds of great players. And because they were still alive then. He was playing Joe Henderson. It was like, you name it. And Michael Brecker. And so he's just a powerful experience, like the way he can almost carry an entire big band. And then just being able to play. And he was stretching out also on the tune we were playing to a point where it's like, oh, it's like old school, it's like people like, that's how, if they're feeling it, they're just going to keep going. And he was feeling it. And he gave like 10 choruses. It was like a lot of choruses, and it was just, and the energy, and he just kind of brought you on this ride with him. And I was like, okay, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Did you get to check out a recording of that, or does it just live in your memory?
No, it's in the memory. Yeah, I don't.
That's probably a good thing, right? Yeah,
I think that's an underrated, underestimated thing these days because everything is documented. It's like sometimes, if I heard it back, I'd probably just try to find ways that everything that was wrong with it. But
right.
The fact that I could just remember it as a memory, as a very impactful memory that basically made me want to become a musician, I think that's enough. I'll leave it at, I almost don't want to know how it sounds at this point.
Was Alan playing with you in that big band at that time too?
Yeah. We were in school together.
Nice. Fantastic.
Yeah. So we were just freaking out, and it was great.
I have a few more questions for you. We already talked about Marc Copland a bit, so I'm just going to urge people to check out the album Someday. And then there's the newer album that came out called Dreaming.
Yeah, that was cool because we did it. It was during European tour. We had some days off and recorded in this studio in like Germany, and we lived in this studio, and it was great. It was very cool. Yeah,
I'm obsessed with that tune. Maybe I already mentioned this earlier, but I'm obsessed with that tune, "Spinning Things."
Oh, it's a great
off of
tune.
Someday.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so great. What is that? You use this symbol quite frequently, but it sounds like a trash or swish or china or some kind of symbol.
That's the complex one. That's the original Zildjian dry complex ride, if you know that ride symbol. It's the one that Bill Stewart designed.
Yeah, as the main ride. But then you use another symbol. Do you use like a
let
China
me think,
or some kind of?
On that? I think on the far right was a Istanbul. It's like a 21. Was it a 20? Yeah, it's 21-inch Istanbul signature. You know, the ones with the green writing on it, green stamp.
Yeah.
That one on the far right, and then on the left, I think was just a crash. It was just if I remember correctly, I think it's just like a Sabian or something.
Oh, okay. So just regular symbols.
Yeah, I kind of used that combination on a few different things that I always liked how they played together, even though they're all different companies and everything. But I always liked how they interacted with each other. That's those sounds.
Yeah, they're so great.
Yeah.
And another thing that I found during the research that I wanted to ask you about is there's a video. You have very few videos of your own.
Yeah, I haven't done the leader thing much.
Yeah,
but,
right. But there is that one video. I think the tune is called Anemone.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was like, I need something for something. Yeah, so.
And is that a tune that you wrote? And
yeah, I wrote that. And just we did it in like 15, 20 minutes at my friend's.
Oh, wow.
Great. I was just there. That's where we recorded with Alex a couple weeks ago. But it's got Matt Morantz. It's a great saxophone player, tenor saxophone player. And in their apartment, Matt and Luke Morantz. Luke is a great piano player. They both play on it. And I just wanted a little bit of content for myself, maybe for my website, or I'm not really sure for what, but I just wanted to get the ball rolling. And eventually I want to do some kind of a record. Who knows when that'll be, but
cool.
But anyway, that was just basically Matt recorded it. It was at their apartment. Under their apartment, you take a staircase down. They've got a whole recording studio down there. It's unbelievable. And right in New York, right in the city, in the apartment building. And he's got all his great mics and drums, piano. I think Luke was doing mostly analog synth stuff on that. But yeah, we just kind of had fun. I had a very limited time to do it. I think Luke had about 20 minutes. And my friend Matt Pavolka, too, great bass player. And I rarely get to play with him on electric. And I really love how he plays electric bass. So anyway, that was a fun little thing to try out. I don't really prioritize composing or writing, but it's one of those things where it would be great to do more of it, just because it's pandemic. I had time to do it. I actually wrote a few different things, but
cool.
But thanks for checking that out. That's it's not what I'm necessarily. I'm mostly just a sideman.
Right.
99% of the time, I was like, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to record something. So thanks for checking.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it was very cool. And one small detail I wanted to ask you about, in that video, I noticed you were using a metal pearl snare drum. And then I saw that snare drum show up on a couple other gigs. I think I saw you using it out at Sam First.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, metal. Yeah, it's like chrome over brass, deep drum. That's the same one I play, I think, with Marc Copland's album. And
okay.
It's definitely can be a rock drum, but it's a weirdly sensitive drum as well. It's got it's not like a metal drum with a ton of sound coming back at you. It's like those hammered bronze drums. It's like kind of tempered, mellow a little bit. So it's kind of fun drum to play. Yeah,
sounds great. And it was just, you don't often see, you do see drummers bring their own snare drums to gigs with house kits, but not too often. So I wanted to ask you about that since I saw it out and about. I have one more topic if you're up for it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about playing free music or free improvisation. I checked out the Tony Malaby Turnpike Diaries. There's that John O'Gallagher Live in Brooklyn album. And your playing is just so great in that context as well. You keep it interesting and moving. And I'm just curious when you started to get into playing free improv and kind of what you hang on to when you're playing that type of music and what you feel your responsibility is within the group, since you're not just keeping time and building. Well, I mean, you are building, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I could scratch the surface. That's a big one, a big topic.
It is, yeah.
But again, like early on, me and my brother were just kind of getting into everything. And I remember we got really into like some of that stuff, like extreme, like Evan Parker, some of those English free jazz cats, really kind of the noise scene. This guy John Butcher, we would go see some pretty extreme music. Guy would just like play his mouthpiece for 20 minutes, with mixed results. But like when I feel what it taught me was, we have the certain comfort zone when we play music, especially when it's tune based or like more in the jazz world. But like when it gets totally sonic and just about texture and sound, there can be, at least when I first started doing it, it's very little to grab onto, not really knowing how to inhabit that world, not really knowing what to play, how to play, what to do, like, should I play, should I not play? All these decisions you're posed with in that world that you're not posed with in a different world where it's like you kind of like you have a role, you have a responsibility. So it took me, a long time to kind of figure that out. And again, it was just being around people and try to put myself in positions to play with people that did that well, that were in that world and committed to that world. Tony certainly is one of those people that, I mean, he can play. He's another guy. He can play whatever. I mean, he's got a pretty huge pedigree of gigs from very down the middle to not. And so I think that's, Ralph Alessi is someone I play with a ton over the years. Lots of different projects. There's this guy, one of the first things, this guy, Robert Riegel, that nobody knows, but I mean, he was an interesting guy because he started with Albert Eiler. So he didn't even, I think he was just and like studied the music of Papua New Guinea. He had this weird thing. It was like, whoa, you're coming from a different place. Yeah. And he would do these free jazz, voluntary, like this free jazz ensemble every Wednesday night or something at UCLA and put us in positions to like totally unusual. Like one day we showed up and he just had a soap opera playing on a TV and said, we're going to turn the sound off. We're just going to improvise to the image. It's like, okay, all right, I'll try that. So next week, turn the lights off, whatever, the next week after that, it was some kind of different stimulus that you happen to play off of. I'd never done that before, but it was a good challenge. And that was kind of the beginnings. And then again, LA doesn't really have much of a scene for that. So when I moved to New York, I was able to get involved with people that there's like a scene of like underground kind of improvisers that I was able to sort of tap into a little bit and go see and sometimes play with. And I think it was just a matter of like doing it for me and learning, just getting different input and like kind of learning how to do it along the way. And everyone sort of does it in a different way. And just sort of what it taught me is to just trust your instincts and to stay strong with who you are as a player. And also it also forced me to think about space a lot more, like you can play really sparse. You can not play. You can by not playing, you allow other things to happen. And you can kind of shape the music in a different way when you're playing in that zone. And also it helped me explore the actual instrument more in terms sonically. So like finding different ways to play the instrument using different mouths or hands or whatever it is, and finding sometimes sonically like different ways to complement whatever's happening in the improvisation. And that's, again, it just depends on the moment. It depends on where the music is, and it's very unpredictable in some ways where it's going to go, as opposed to playing Donna Lee. Like you kind of know what's going to happen in a sense, but you know what I mean? So kind of opened me up to that world.
Structured at least, right? Okay, cool. Well, I just, we should probably wrap it up. I have a couple of wrap-up questions that I'm going to ask that are a little bit quicker. The first one is, what album have you listened to more than any other? And it doesn't have to be jazz and doesn't have to be cool, but is there an album that you have maybe listened to more than anything else?
That is a great question. Wow. This is definitely a question I've got before, and I'm never able to fully answer it. But let me think about this. Again, it depends on the like your different stages of development. But I would say, one that pops out consistently is Larry Young's Unity is one of those albums. I would say that I've listened to that a ton, and for whatever reason, it's got this mysterious quality in terms of how the time is played and all this, the blowing is great.
It is, yeah.
I would say that is pretty high up there. Like I said, that Art Blakey Big Beat, I probably listened to that more than I think I've listened to it, just because
right.
It's literally how I started playing music. So I think especially early on, I probably played with that one hundreds of times, That would definitely be another one up there. I'll leave it at those two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And is there anything in your playing that you feel like you need to actively work to keep up on or to improve? Like, are there any weaknesses that you have that you're always trying to stay on top of?
Oh, yeah. That's kind of how I gear my practicing. Is like, what do I need to work on? One thing always, and I think you probably get this from a lot of drummers, is up tempos.
Oh, yeah.
Up tempos are something, if I don't use them, I lose them pretty fast. So that's a weakness of mine. I can't it seems like some people can just go to the drums and boom, just play every time and take a year off. And it's like, how do you do that? But those kind of tempos is something that's definitely, like, I would say that could be a weakness. If I don't work on it, I'm gonna lose that. So like those kinds of playing quickly, playing super fast, like those kind of things I try to check in on, and always try to fit that in. Whatever else I'm practicing, I always try to get like 10 minutes of that in my practicing.
Oh, okay.
Whether it's that or brushes even harder to keep that chop up. Is like, doesn't come naturally to me. I need to work on it on a regular basis, or else I've been on gigs where I haven't been working on it. And it's like, it's a real slog.
Yeah.
It's like my arm.
It's rough.
Yeah. It's going to fall off.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, where's the best place that people can keep up with what you're doing? I know you're not really active on social media, but I know you still record and tour a whole lot. What's the best way to keep up with you?
Yeah. Well, that question inspires me to try to get back on top of it. A lot of my gigs are posted via other people or myself sometimes on Facebook. I know it's a kind of an archaic platform at this point, but nonetheless, that's kind of what probably is the most effective. I've got a website which isn't up to date, but I should do that. But that would give people a way to find out what I've done discographical wise, and just some different things to listen to and check out, and a way to get in touch with me as well through the contact. So I'd say at the moment those two things would be the best way. Okay,
cool. Well, I'll put some links in the show notes, and I might even share my Spotify playlist that I put together with a ton of your stuff on it. And then I'm looking forward to seeing you here in Minneapolis next week, so I'll make sure to say hi.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you in person for sure. Yeah, thanks for doing this, and what a great thing you've got going on.
Oh, thanks. All right, well, I'll talk to you later, and I'll see you soon.
Awesome. All right, Craig. See ya.
All right, thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe on your platform of choice and share it with a friend. You can find the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram as Practicing Drummer, and I also have a blog at practicingdrummer.com.